I think they're starting to go, yeah, we got a problem. So in there, they're saying we have to make significant investments. Again, not a dollar cost on it, but even their own Colorado Energy offices said this is the most expensive, wind, solar, and batteries, most expensive way and least reliable way to power the state.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And before we dive into the main topic that we want to discuss on this week's episode, we did want to provide just another quick update on some of the election results. Last week's episode was in the immediate aftermath of the election in Colorado because we count very slow here. We didn't exactly know the final outcome of all the races. So, Amy, you wanted to point out a few key ones.
Yeah. Actually, Weld County, my home county, God bless Weld County, home of oil and gas, largest oil-producing county in Colorado. Although production's down, and that's a show for another day. But we'll do that one. So it looks like Weld County has eliminated has beaten all Democrat elected officials. So policy-making officials. So what does that mean? Well, Ryan Gonzalez beat Mary Young in House District 50. Then you go to Congress, CD 8, which goes from, it hugs the Highway 85 corridor, and goes from essentially Brighton to Greeley. Gabe Evans beat Yadira Caraveo in CD8, which is also part of the balance of power in the U.S. House. So that legislative seat has been taken from an incumbent Democrat. The other one, if the lead holds, would be Dan Woog in House District 19, which is Boulder and Weld County. So it's a little bit of Boulder. There's Weld County in there as well. And Dan was elected to the state house. Mm-hmm. Then when it was redistricted. The new district was drawn. He lost it in 2022 and looks like he has gotten it back in 2024. And what does this mean? Well, essentially what it means is that you said Weld County, which is a conservative county, and it is a blue collar county. These are people that make things, like they produce things like, oil. And it is people that it's what we would call sort of the muscle generation, right? They work out in the oil and gas fields. It doesn't mean there's nothing else there, but it is a blue collar community, exceedingly conservative. But what happened with redistricting is Weld County's power as a conservative county got diluted. And it did. Mary Young seat is a prime example. That seat, House District 50, was one of the smallest seats in the state, and it was drawn in a way that would make it, quote, competitive. Even though Weld County and Greeley were conservative areas, made it competitive. It was held by a Democrat for 2 decades. Well, that has flipped. Dan Woog's seat is another prime example. What they did in redistricting is they carved out a bit of Weld and put it with a bit of Boulder, because why keep communities, sort of like communities together, or why even keep counties together? We can break up and dilute Weld by putting it with Boulder, or same thing, they do it with Larimer. Anyway, the point being, looks like if all the leads hold, Weld County will be back in the painted red column.
And no surprise there that because it is Weld County, energy featured very prominently in all of these campaigns that we're talking about.
In all of them, energy mattered. It is, because it's an agricultural county, and it is an energy county, and those were the two most important industries in Weld County. And so it mattered. Let's put it this way: energy helped paint Weld County red again.
Yep.
And there's one more, and I'll let you take that. This is on Pueblo County, another county that is starting to paint itself red.
That's right. Another blue collar county, like we talked about.
Yeah, actually very much alike.
Yeah, or the wrench turners and folks that actually, like you said, work with their hands. So Danae Escar, if listeners will recall, a couple episodes ago, we actually did an entire episode about her because she wrote an op-ed in, I believe it was the Pueblo Chieftain. I think it was the Pueblo paper down there. Essentially taking Black Hills, which is the investor-owned utility that serves that area, taking them to task for their rate request increase. And our whole episode was about how, when she was a lawmaker, she voted for a lot of these bills that are leading to, but anyway, she was a seated county commissioner at the time when she wrote that op-ed. And as of this election, she is no longer a county commissioner because she lost her reelection bid to a Republican in Pueblo County.
That's right. A challenger, her name was, I think, Paula McFeeter. I think it is, Pheeter. So she new to politics, but she beat an incumbent Democrat county commissioner. And then there's one more down south I think we need to make note of because it's House District 16. It's El Paso County,
right,
where Republican Rebecca Kilty, she is leading Steph Vigil by 21 votes. That's the last I read. Now, why does this matter? Democrats dominate Republicans in the House. Well, if they win all of those seats, then they break the supermajority, which means things like referred measures won't just be an automatic if all Democrats stay together. You'd have to get at least one or possibly two Republicans to cross over. So
yeah, no, it's a great point. It does have definitely policy ramifications for the balance of power at the state assembly. But moving on from election updates, what the big story we wanted to talk about today is actually something that Amy uncovered. About a month ago, Governor Polis sent a letter to the PUC and several other state agencies, essentially calling for a whole-of-state approach to so-called beneficial electrification. So things like replacing your gas home heater or your gas-powered vehicle with electric alternatives. This is obviously a big priority for the state. And the reason he did so, he's calling for this whole of state approach, is because someone is very concerned about the cost of this transition.
Yeah. So this is an interesting letter, and you can find the story about it in the Incomplete Colorado. Sherry Pike did a story about it, but then the Denver Gazette did an opinion editorial about it as well. And, when you start looking at all of these things, and we've talked a lot about this, Jake, but somebody, and I'm not going to say it's the governor, because I'm not certain he even knows yet, but whoever wrote that letter is very concerned about the cost of all of this on Colorado ratepayers and this beneficial electrification. First, there's no such thing. This is simply electrification of the state's economy, and that ratepayers are going to have to pay for it. It is not the most efficient way to power your state. They somehow seem to think that it is. But this is the first page is a cover page. So let's call it a 6-page letter about the whole of government approach. In other words, all of these state agencies are supposed to get together and offer policy recommendations by summer of 2025. And I think it's August of 2025. And I went back and actually looked at this because I'm the kind of person who'll do, when they put out some kind of a report or roadmap to 100% wind, solar, and batteries, when they do that, I always check to see the cost. And it goes back to the 2018 election when we were the only ones constantly asking Jared Polis and his challenger at the time, I'm constantly asking, how much is this going to cost? Have you figured out a cost? What is it going to cost? And he wouldn't answer. So we did it. And actually we came up with, at that time, this was 2019 or 2018. This would have been 2018. We came up with a figure of $45 billion. And Jared Polis said, no, I don't know what it's going to cost, but it's not going to cost $45 billion. Well, fast forward, and it's going to cost far more than that. So he was right in that it's not going to cost $45 billion. It's just going to cost way more than that. So what you have is this 6-page letter directed to state agencies to try and figure out how to keep lipstick on the energy pig, make it look good, because the word cost in this letter appears 28 times on the 6 pages. And I bring that up because all of the other ones, I've gone and done the same exercise. The first one he put out, it was a 10-page document. The word cost appeared, I think it was 10 or 12 times, and many of those times it had to do with the social cost of carbon. So there's been little concern about the impact on ratepayers until now, when we see, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, Xcel announced it was going to have to spend $22 billion on just transmission. There's the Fenberg rider, which is a blank check to Xcel to rebuild out or build the further develop the distribution system. And then, of course, there have just been the spikes in utility rates and our utility bills overall that ratepayers are feeling. And so I think they're starting to go, yeah, we got a problem. So in there, they're saying we have to make significant investments. Again, not a dollar cost on it, but even their own Colorado Energy offices said this is the most expensive, wind, solar, and batteries, most expensive way and least reliable way to power the state. And they want to do things like bring data centers and all this kind of stuff. I have a feeling that somebody's been at least getting in Polis's ears saying, if you want to be president, what you don't want is a winter storm Uri and then really high electric rates on your watch.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's funny, speaking of high electric rates and being afraid of that, they actually throw California under the bus in this letter, talking about, we need to go down this path to fulfill all these climate goals. States like California have done so, but their electricity rates have doubled over the time. And so it is funny that they're pointing out one state that policy-wise is fairly similar to Colorado, but is throwing them under the bus in doing so. But to your overall broader point, someone, whether it's Polis or an advisor, someone's clearly sweating in the governor's office about this. They talk about the load growth from electrification, their goals. Data centers is coming up, where we've talked about the state really hasn't talked about data center policy much, other than a couple proposed bills to give them tax credits, and really wasn't treating them as seriously as you've seen many other utilities across the country. And now all of a sudden they're starting to worry. They refer to a report that Xcel has said on an earnings call that they have about 7 gigawatts of data center projects in their pipeline, when they point out Xcel's entire retail peak demand in the state of Colorado is 7 gigawatts. So they have as much data center projects in their pipeline as the entire state's, or at least all of Xcel's electricity demand. And so I think somebody is starting to see the writing on the wall that it ain't going to cut it. Current policy ain't going to cut it, and we're not going to get there cheaply if we keep going down this path.
And here's the thing. They kept saying, and have been saying for years, that it was going to save ratepayers money.
Yeah.
And it's not. And we literally, sitting at this table inside of this building, we're, of course, in the fancy studios at the Independence Institute, and that's where we are when we're on set like this. It has literally only been this building and people inside this building that have been pushing back on how much is it going to cost Coloradans, and the lack of curiosity of people to. Polis didn't know when he planned it. And clearly he's now looking at or somebody in his office is looking at the numbers. May not be him, but somebody in his office is looking at the numbers going, okay, the Colorado Energy Office said $61 billion. And I don't think that included transmission.
No, didn't.
And now Xcel is coming out and saying $22 billion. So $61 billion just without transmission lines. Then Xcel is coming out and saying $22 billion for transmission lines to build out the infrastructure. I mean, do the math. So in 2018, Polis said it won't cost $45 billion. Those crazy people at the Independence Institute, what do they know? Well, it turns out we're the only ones that were talking about it. And what I don't understand, Jake, and admittedly, I've been gone for a few years. I was in North Carolina. For those of you who might be new to the show, spent 4 years in North Carolina where the policy is a little more sane there, but nobody seems to have the courage. And I'm going to say this at the legislature too, because and that doesn't mean everybody there, but as a whole, as a unit, demanding to know the price tag on this. And what we clearly see, there was that interim committee,
right?
That did what? And the utilities are only responding to the atmosphere that has been created for them, whether it's Black Hills or it's XL Energy. They're being mandated to do this, and so there's nothing. I mean, they have to do it, and so therefore we have to pay for it.
Right.
And now they're looking at it going, we're worried about cost, significant investments, but nobody's putting a dollar figure on it. You know why? Because they're scared to.
I really do think they are scared because they talk about things that they're going to do to sort of curtail these significant investments from jacking up the prices that ratepayers like you or I might pay. And it's all stuff that, comes up a lot in energy policy, but to me sounds a little dystopian. Talking about if customer rates are designed to shape customer behavior according to system needs. So we're gonna shape your behavior to fit the system's needs, not build the system to support whatever needs you may have as a free consumer or a free business that wants to operate. Then hopefully we can control some of these costs. And so that's where we're getting to the point where things are getting tight. They're sweating. They're worried, and to try to help them along the way, I guess they're going to have to get more and more, I don't know, authoritarian or shape your behavior to be a good citizen and meet the needs of the grid.
Right.
Not what can the grid do for you. It's what can you do for the grid.
Well, so here's what was interesting. And again, we do this so you don't have to. I tuned into the PUC meeting. Yeah. I think you did as well.
I did.
And here's what they're doing with this. And I'm beginning to wonder if even Eric Blank is starting to get it.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. Eric Blank is the Public Utilities Commission chair, so he's the chairman. When I say they, I mean this polis, the whatever's coming out of the governor's mansion, and then supported by whatever necessary legislation. They did a PowerPoint presentation. And we've got some screenshots of it, and we'll figure out a way to drop that in the show notes. But here's the thing. They are building the system to meet the demands of data centers and AI facilities that we don't even know if they're coming yet.
Right. So
they want to, let's say double, if demand is going to go up 50%, they, meaning the state of Colorado, they intend to build to that demand, to meet that demand. So in other words, it's their philosophy is we're going to build it and hope that they come. Now you're talking about, I don't know, let's say our study is off by 2/3. And it costs you $200 billion, which isn't that far off considering that DOE or CEO, Colorado Energy Office figured it was going to cost $61 billion, and you need $22 billion worth of transmission. And then you're going to need another, and that's just for XL, and then you're going to need the distribution system on top of that. Let's just say it costs $200 billion, but it's built on wind, solar, and batteries, and it's unreliable. Guess who's not coming here? Data centers have to have power. You can't just shut off a data center because you feel like it. They have to stay on. They're not. You could give them, I guess, an economic development rate where they decide that where they're willing to, but the point of a data center is, first responders need it, hospitals need it, schools need it. You can't just shut it off because you feel like it. But let's say they do $200 billion, and let's say the data centers don't materialize. Let's say Jared Polis's tech friends decide, you know what? You're out on your own. You built it with wind, solar, and batteries. We're not coming there. And who's left with that? Colorado will be bankrupt.
Captive ratepayers.
We'll be bankrupt.
Yeah, that's why I hope we can put some of those slides in the show notes, because some of them were staggering, looking at current trajectory of growth, of load growth and asset growth over the last 10 plus years, and it's fairly stable. And then they're projecting over the next 8 years alone, it goes up like a hockey stick,
and they want to build to it.
And to your point, sort of at the end of that presentation, Chairman Blank seemed a little apprehensive, and I almost saw a bead of sweat coming out on his temple, because
little nervous laugh,
because I could tell he was a little discomforted by the amount of load growth that we're talking about and building for.
And if we get it wrong, you're looking at like 45 cents a kilowatt hour, which is right now we're at about 15, 16 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's with all the tariffs and tax. This is 45 cents without tariffs and fees and taxes.
Yep. We're getting into California territory.
Oh yeah. And here's the other thing. We will be a winter peaking system. So California doesn't have a lot of winter peaking. So, I mean, they do in the Sierras and other places, but a winter peaking system in Colorado at 45 cents, and let's say 45 to 50 cents a kilowatt hour when you add in fees and taxes. Do the math. Just go look at your own utility bill and see how many kilowatt hours you had, and then multiply it by 45 or 50 cents.
Yeah, it's going to be expensive.
So imagine if you've got a big family, a big house, and you're using, in the middle of winter, you're using, let's say, 2,000 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be unusual if you have a large house and a large family. Because if you look at your summer, if you've got a large house and a large family, a bunch of people coming in and out and stuff, 2,000 kilowatt hours is not, it sounds like a lot. It's not a ton. It really is not. So at 50 cents a kilowatt, you're looking at $1,000.
Yeesh. It's going to be a pricey winter for folks if this comes true.
Yeah.
And it's what, like you said, it's what we've been saying for the longest time. I'm glad it's finally starting to dawn on folks at the governor's office that this load growth the prospect of it is real. The prospect of spiking utility rates is absolutely real. I'm glad that they're finally at least taking heed, but I am a little nervous about which direction we're going to go from here.
I'm also very nervous because they're not being honest with the public. They're saying it in a letter to these state agencies, but there is no honest conversation with the public. They're still saying it's going to save ratepayers money.
Good point.
And it's not true. It is 100% not true. All you have to do is look at how much you've spent on your utility bills, and you can see that your rates have gone up. So that's my thing, is that they're not being honest with them.
As we're coming up on time here at the end of this episode, we'll obviously drop all of this in the show notes. It's a long letter, but if you're interested in this stuff, it's worth taking a look at. And obviously, Sherry and Complete Colorado did a good write-up that you can check out as well. Do you have any major takeaways for our listeners on this?
One is the governor's looking for cover ahead of a 2028 presidential run. I believe that, and maybe he's not. Maybe he doesn't know. Although he should be smarter than that. Clearly, some people are looking to find cover for him because these rates, it's going to get bad. So they're looking for cover. That's number one. Number two, we didn't vote on this. This is the most regressive type of tax or fee, and there was no vote on this. And then, of course, get a generator.
It's getting even more important to heed that advice. Thanks, Amy. That does it for us on another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw here, you can head on over to PowerGab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you might get audio-only podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And if you want to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests that you'd like to hear us interview, you can send those over to info@powergab.org. We'd love to hear from our listeners. But until next week, we'll see you.